Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Well, the newspaper is full of it today. On today's show, we're going to be discussing post-Brexit supply chains. And the question we're going to be asking you is, are you ready? I suppose the bigger question is anybody ready for anything? If you look at the newspapers, it's a strange old day today. Joining me in the studio today to discuss this and maybe give you some direction on where you're going to be going is Paul Mayhew. He's the owner of Wyndham Solutions. Paul, it's lovely to have you on the programme with us today.
Good afternoon, Steve.
And a very apt morning and afternoon it is as well, because over the weekend, Theresa May, she's been over to Brussels, she's signed a piece of paper. And since she signed this piece of paper, the Spanish have said they want to build a Gibraltar. The French have said they want the fisheries back again. And one does feel that, what did we gain over the weekend? What was that all about then? Where do you think we are at the moment, Paul?
I'm sorry to say, I think we're still 2 years on from the original referendum that we still don't really know where we are. If anybody says they can tell me what the outcome's going to be in the end, I think they're joking. You see so many alternative opinions even in the media again today. We have, I think what Mrs May now has done is created a divorce deal. But whether that divorce deal is actually going to get through Parliament in 2 or 3 weeks' time, I think everybody can see that it's going to be very, very tough. It's
been interesting listening to the radio this morning. I was listening on the way in, and the views are very, very different. You do get, obviously, politicians. There was a lot of Conservatives I listened to this morning on the radio. Many of those particular politicians, they were very positive because they obviously want to keep their jobs. They feel that she's done a fantastic job and it really is the right way forward, and we can step back for a moment. We can say, right, something's been done, and now we can move forward to the future with a bit of confidence. While others are saying that it is a complete and utter betrayal, and other people are saying that this will never ever get through. So what are we doing? Are we just treading water, do you think?
I think what she's done is she's created a platform. She's created a basis for a divorce settlement and a outline of a future trade agreement, knowing always that that was going to come under fierce criticism from all angles. But now at least you have something that everybody can focus on. And I think if there's any success that's coming out of this at this stage is that it now focuses the mind, it focuses all the political attention, so that people at least have something. Because in the past it was all conversations about could be this, could be that, could go this direction. And we've been in that stage for 2 years. Now at least we have.
Do you think we've got some clarity now then?
I think at least we know there's a document on the table. We know what that document says, and we know what the alternative. Everybody's putting forward all the alternative arguments.
But the Europeans, Brussels, are saying that is it. It's not going to change from that. Do you believe that?
I think they've got to say that, haven't they? They've got to say. I think.
I'm asking you.
I think they've got a deal that probably they're comfortable with. It gives them still control. We saw some of those aspects talked about in the media, but I think it also now gives them some timelines. They've met their obligation to come up with a divorce settlement, and they've got something on the table now, as they've put at the weekend. Now it's for the UK government to accept it, and I think. It still raises far more questions than answers. And so can anybody be happy with it? No, I don't think anybody got out to bed this morning and said, oh, we now know where we're going, because we don't.
Well, let's see what the newspapers were actually saying. We just bring some of the front pages of the papers up here. So, Daily Express, get on with it. The headline, the EU has signed off on May's Brexit deal that has split the nation on December the 12th. The meaningful vote takes place in the House of Commons. The front page of the Daily Mail, Theresa's frantic fortnight, so she's got a lot of work ahead of her. The Daily Mirror, of course, now for the hard bit. Interestingly, also sharing the headlines, of course, is Harry Redknapp from I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Daily Star, They know where the things are important and how to actually tackle what's going on in the public eye at the moment. Panto's Axe Dwarf for kid actors. Shock Horror Probe. Outcry at Grinch Tube Strike Misery from the Evening Standard. Are they on the same planet as us? And also Mayseek's Corbyn TV debate on Deal. That's going to be interesting. And I wonder, when we start using the media, and we're talking about what's going to be happening within the media eye, whether what's actually happening is that all we're doing is we're just trying to distract from the main question. So if he says no to that, that's going to be another discussion. He was too scared, he wasn't scared, he is scared, he's not scared. We've got another distraction taking place.
Yes. Has
this all been smoke and mirrors as well, do you feel?
I think the end of the day, everybody has their own political angles of how they want this to come out. You know, you can say, is the Labour angle really about trying to get another election?
Do you feel, on reflection then, that perhaps maybe what we should have done, we shouldn't have left this down to the politicians? That this really is a business issue? Well, we're going to find out what you do in a moment, which will be a lovely surprise for everybody. But you're in the supply chain. I mean, you were one of those people that brought goods in and out of the UK. That was what your job was. It was taking stuff through customs and doing all of that. Should we have had people like you dealing with this and your contemporaries?
What was interesting for me was when this first was announced, I was actually approached through an agency to help the Department for Leaving the EU understand what customs clearance was. What was involved, how much did it cost, what did the documents look like, what was the processes. They didn't go to their own customs division. They came and asked business because they just didn't know what these things were. And that immediately sets all the alarm bells ringing. As you know, 40 years ago, my first job in shipping was to do customs entries for goods coming from the Netherlands. So sitting in an office writing out all these forms. So for me, it's going back 40 years now to back where we were before, to actually importing goods from the Netherlands and from the whole EU with customs controls. Does that frighten me? No, because actually that is what we do for all the goods coming in from Asia, all the goods coming from the US. Today, all arrive on these huge ships into Felixstowe and other ports and end up on the shelves in Debenhams. Does anybody hear about issues? No. And that actually, under the WTO arrangements, would be what we revert to. It would be the same situation as all these other countries. It would mean that we have to undo that bureaucracy, but it's something we've done. We do it for everything else. So actually, does going back to no deal or WTO approach frighten me? No, I think this country can handle that.
Do you think the linguistics that we use, the way that we describe what's happening, we talk about a hard Brexit, we talk about crashing out of the EU, is that where the media and organisations like, you know, we're the people that are the voice of what we feel the people are saying, but the very voice that we use is the wrong voice?
Yeah, I think the portrayal from the outset has been hard Brexit and soft Brexit. You know, one sounds very cosy and nice and one sounds a bit of a nightmare. But actually, as I said just now, I think there are the expertise in this country, there's the dynamism, there's the innovation in this country that actually, whatever happens, we'll get through it. And I'm a firm believer that whichever way this goes, and no one really knows today which way that will be, that in 5 years' time this country will be still a very productive, successful country.
If you were a betting man, would you say that, as it stands at the moment, that Theresa, God love her, will fail miserably? She won't get it through the House of Commons, because at the moment she's taking the tact of nearly going above her politician's head, and she's appealing directly. How this is going to work, I don't know, but she's appealing directly to the British people. I mean, they don't actually have a say when it comes to it going through the House of Commons, so what she's hoping on is that her politicians will represent the voice of the people they represent. Well, they're not doing that now. Why should they do it then?
Indeed. Yeah, I'm not going to say where I think this is going, because I don't think anybody can say that. If my own personal thought is, I think she'll lose that first vote. I think she'll then come back with possibly some amendments, because if the alternative is no deal, let's face it, no deal is as bad for Europe as it is for the UK. So I think she will come back with some adjustments and try and get it through on a second vote. That's my gut feel, but it's purely personal opinion.
When we talk about no deal, do you think people understand what those consequences are? What would be the impact? Because we hear the scaremongering. I mean, this morning, the one I heard was that we would run out of fresh water. I mean, that is just fantastic, isn't it? And it's going to stop raining. There's going to be thunderstorms and a plague of locusts.
Yeah.
But what could be, if we go back to World Trade, WTO, what happens at that particular point? What would be the consequences, do you feel?
I can only talk really from a supply chain point of view, but I think we would then get into a situation whereby there are a number of different aspects to Brexit, a number of different aspects to supply chain, and people always think about duties and taxes. Bear in mind, a lot of the WTO duty rates are zero. So people talk about all these extra duties and taxes, but actually a number of the goods moving across on WTO pay no taxes anyway. I think there will be issues in terms of things like regulatory control. I think there'll be issues on CE marking, for example, and there are a number of different pieces. In fact, you've got a slide there, Steve, which
just have a quick look at this.
Covers up a number of different items. There are things like all the elements of dealing with customers and suppliers. And contractual terms around that. If you're suddenly outside the European Union, a lot of your contracts are governed by EU law. So you need to start thinking about how those contracts are constructed, what law will have jurisdiction. Again, we want to get away from the European Court of Justice. So a lot of these oversights of legal terms need to be looked at in all these contracts. The elements of insurance, under EU law, again, as an insurance company, you have to have a base in the European Union, an office or a representation there. So if your insurance for a European transportation is currently done in the United Kingdom, there's issues around that because that insurance company may not be recognised, so you may not be insured. European standards. There's a lot of talk about standards and compliance with standards as part of the negotiation.
But weren't we at the figurehead of that? I mean, we are a nation that we love our standards, don't we?
Absolutely. We brought a lot of those things.
And we go to the Europeans and we go, you need to have a standard for that.
Yeah.
I mean, they can come up with the funny shaped banana ones, but we're the guys that come up with the serious ones, aren't we?
And we drove that. But of course, once the UK is no longer part of the EU, a lot of the recognitions that the UK enjoys disappears overnight. So, if you've had your goods CE marked or with pharmaceutical products, if they've been approved by a UK body, that approval no longer is legitimate. So you have to then go and get them approved by somebody within the 27 countries.
Is that not what we should have been actually negotiating, the fact that our CE approval is as good as, or at least the same as theirs?
Well, of course it is today, because of course we're part of those EU regulations. So it's proven that our standards are the same, that they're compliant, and that those approvals are all done on the same quality standards. That, even though it disappears if hard Brexit happens at the end of March, the European Union knows that those approvals have all been done under their standards. Their concern is more about any changes to those standards to then comply with trade deals that we want to do with other parts of the world. And so that's why there's this whole issue around CE marking, back quality. And again, on supply chain, when I've met with many companies helping them prepare for Brexit, those first conversations are always about delays and about duty. But when you start getting into CE marks, certificates of conformity, all these various other elements, there's shock in the room because they hadn't realised that those are also going to be part of the elements of supply chain they had to start looking at, and urgently.
Listen, we're going to be talking more about the supply chain. Paul Mayhew is my guest on today's show. He's the owner of Wyndham Solutions. We're looking at supply chain, what you should be doing within your organisation, what you should be aware of, what may happen, what may not happen. If anything happens, something will happen. We know that, but whatever it's going to be, nobody's still quite certain. And will it play into your hands? Will it be a benefit to your organisation? Will it be a benefit to your business? Or will it make things very, very difficult? Still more to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. It's lovely to have your company as always. We're live here on a Monday. Hope you're enjoying the show. It is very, very busy out there in the press. A lot of people, we're all looking into our crystal balls and none of these crystal balls are working. I think the thing that always amazes me about all of this is that we have all these experts, and Paul included, but we have all these experts. For instance, they didn't see the financial crash coming, did they? Only one, I think, saw the financial crash. So we've got the London School of Economics, the LSE, we've got the Bank of England, we've got all these experts that are there all the time. Are they just all a little bit too close to it? They just don't see anything coming when it's just common sense and in their face. So more to come on what you should be doing in your supply chain in just a few moments' time here on this edition of Business Connections Live. Let's go back a week now to last week's show. We talked to Matthew Ruddle. He is a director from InTouch CRM. We were talking about understanding the customer journey. A great show, actually, last week. Really enjoyed having Matthew in. He'd been on the program before, but we were talking a little bit about automation, what you should be doing when it comes to keeping in contact with your customer. It's about acquiring new customers and then taking them through that complete customer journey to when they actually purchase and when they repeat purchase and so on. And what the techniques and the tools and the tips that you can use to make certain that you do that successfully. It does seem that many businesses will have all the tools, they have all the gear but no idea, and they don't apply any of those key understandings, that key customer journey techniques onto what they're trying to do. Good show last week. Just to remind you what happened on the program, here's the highlights from last week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now on today's show, we're going to be discussing and understanding the customer journey. Joining me in the studio is Matthew Ruddle. He's a director from InTouch. An interesting program today.
Yeah, you do see a lot of businesses that live very hand to mouth, and generally why that is because they don't have processes in place. Because everybody talks about doing lead generation, the top of the funnel stuff. If you want more business, go out and generate more leads. But what they don't tell you is the fact that it's unfortunately not gravity fed. You have to stand out from the crowd. You have to do something to engage with your potential customers. So therefore, you can't just sit and hope that these things happen. You have to draw people along, and that's where things like automation and processes are absolutely key, because it means that your sales become predictable. The ones that are struggling to keep their head above water is because they're looking at the front end, they're looking at sales. But when you kind of look at it and go, that one customer has cost you 6 to 7 times more than it would to actually do more business with existing customers, all of a sudden it takes the shine off the winning new business. And it's because you're always chasing that win. You're always chasing that feel-good factor. And let's face it, who doesn't like winning new business? You know, it's like scoring the winning goal in the World Cup or something like that. It's the endorphins, the adrenaline. And then what? So I have a form on my phone, because we all have our mobile phones and networking meetings. So I pick up the business cards and I put them straight into my phone, into this form, that then puts them straight into my system, that then sends somebody an email 2 hours afterwards, that says, hey, great to meet you earlier. Tell me more about your business and the customers that you're looking for. Because again, that's one of the keys of networking, is being open to helping other people. So I asked them about that. Then maybe a day or 2 days later, they get a video from me, which is my 3 networking tips. Then a few days later, they get another bit of content, and so forth and so forth. So I'm not trying to sell to them. I'm trying to engage with them in terms of sharing content that I've created that might help them with their network. But again, it goes to show them about having processes in place, that I haven't just left that meeting, picked up the business card and put it in the drawer with all the other ones and hoped that some business will grow out of it. I've actually started to engage with them. There is an over-reliance on email sometimes. And I know that sounds a bit of a dodgy thing coming from a company that does email marketing. But again, the whole point of automation is that there are other steps in the process. There are things like tasks that encourage you to pick up the phone and speak to that person because they have done something. You're reacting to them clicking on a link, for instance, so you know that they're more receptive to having that conversation. Picking up the phone is a forgotten thing, because what we have to remember is people buy from people. And don't be afraid to pick up the phone, because you can engage with somebody on that. You know, you can talk to another human being, and you'd have to talk to them as a human being, rather than just think of them as another number and somebody else that I can be, you know, taking a little bit more cash out of their back pocket and putting it in my own. Talk to them as a human being, because if you build up that relationship, well, you not only win that customer today, but it's going to sound like an Oxfam advert, but you also win them for life then, potentially, as well. Identifying your niche can be one of the most scariest things that you can do in business, because it's almost like cutting your nose off to spite your face, because you're thinking, well, I could work with anyone. I can work with you know, a one-man band down the road right the way up to a 20-man company in China. But you're not going to get consistent sales from that. You're not going to know what's working to bring that in. So identifying your niche, and it could just be a case that you go back to your database and you look at how many people you've got in a particular industry. You've got to grab somebody's attention. And there is always a debate over long form and short form. So short form is obviously the short email, long form is almost like War and Peace in an email. unfortunately, we don't have a great attention span these days, and when we're bombarded with emails left, right, and centre, you have to stand out. So therefore, a graphic could be great, but it's also the words that you use. Personally, I think one email a week on a regular basis. So that doesn't mean to send it 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, then the following week is 10 o'clock in the evening on a Thursday, and so forth. That regular communication really does have a big impact on things. Hi, I'm Matt Ruddle from InTouch CRM, and the key takeaways from today's show are: implement a process for your sales side as well as your customer retention side, because the moment you do that, things become measurable. You can then change it and you can get success, and you know what works and what doesn't work. So look after your new sales as well as looking after your customers, and it can make a massive difference to your business.
Matthew Ruddle there, fantastic program. If you get an opportunity, don't forget you can go to the website, you can watch all the shows there, especially that one that was on last week. And autoresponders, CRM systems, I think they're an important part of today's business. If you're not doing it, then you need to be doing it. And there are a number of different tools out there, everything from Infusion Shop. Hello, put the teeth back in. I'm breaking them in for a friend of mine. Infusionsoft, Active Campaign, you've got MailChimp, of course, if you don't want to go into that kind of automation systems, MailChimp, you've got Aweber and people like that. And of course, InTouch CRM. InTouch CRM actually is a very sophisticated, very advanced system, gives you fantastic automation, and they are a UK company as well. So if you go onto the website, you'll find out more details about Matthew and also InTouch CRM as well. By the way, if you enjoyed the promo, you're thinking to yourself, a program like this would be great for my organisation. Well, you could have a show just like this one, or you could maybe perhaps come on this particular show and talk about the key things that would be of interest to other businesses. It's easy to do. All you got to do is do this. Drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. Go on, I dare you, do that today if you don't mind. Or if you want, you can always pick the dog and bone up and give us a call. 01784 256 777 is the telephone number. You can follow our stream of consciousness as well. There we go. You follow our stream of consciousness simply by going to BCL Business TV on the Twitter. And if you want to, you can also watch the program on Facebook, and you can leave your comments on there as well, or you can even ask questions while the program is going out live. It's also up on, it's also being broadcast on Twitter Live as well. So give us a few of those hearts at the moment. But if you really do want to get the full works, the full 9 yards, then go to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. There's over 300 hours, in fact there's nearly 400 hours of great business advice there from some of the UK's leading experts. And if you're setting a business up, if you're looking for funding, if you want sales techniques, marketing techniques, just go to the website, and there's bound to be an expert there that will give you some insight into how you can grow your business and make it more successful. You're watching Business Connections Live. Joining me in the studio today is Paul Mayhew. He's the owner of Wyndham Solutions, and we're talking about your supply chain, what you need to be doing. Before we go any further down there, I suppose the question I should ask is, why should we be listening to you? Who are you then? What are you all about then, Paul?
Yeah, so my name's Paul Mayhew. I've been in basically supply chain all my life. I started off working for a major European transportation company for the first 20 years, actually shipping goods in from the European Union and doing all those customs clearances people are now so frightened of. Then I moved on to Bausch & Lomb, a global manufacturing organisation for the optical industry, and was vice president of supply chain for them. And then after 15 years there, I moved on to Johnson Matthey, FTSE 100 automotive supplier, and worked there as a director of supply chain in the clean air division. When that was finished, and it was during that time actually that Brexit referendum occurred, and we were in a senior management meeting the next morning in Stockholm, and we said, look, Brexit's been decided, we're going to leave. What have we got to do as a company? And I think that's a trick a lot of companies actually missed. To be fair to Johnson Matthey, they put together a multi-skilled team within a couple of days, and within a week we knew what our exposure was to WTO rates of duty on all our products around the world. Now, I don't think many boards actually were that proactive in getting in touch with what needed to be done.
So we kind of missed a trick there. We strategically haven't looked at what the impact is going to be. We haven't done a SWOT effectively, have we?
Correct. And so I was asked to lead the supply chain element of that, and that's really what took me into the Brexit arena. So when you say, what does this guy know about Brexit? Well, of course, a couple of years ago, no one knew anything about Brexit. So there are no pool of Brexit experts out there 2 years ago. And what people like myself have done is to examine the use of our supply chain knowledge and couple that together with our knowledge of Brexit, talk to the Department of Leading the EU, which I've done, be involved in a lot of multifaceted conferences around different aspects of Brexit, to end up with a position today where you're able to go into companies and look at their organisation, look at their supply chains, and give them advice on what they should be doing. And that's really what I've been doing for the last year. I've been going out and visiting customers of various sizes, whether it be large corporations or smaller organisations, and looking at some of their elements of supply chain. Also, as part of that, I've linked in with the group that Gordon Calhoun spoke about when he came here in April, which is the Brexit Advisory Team. And that really, again, talks to the multifaceted nature of Brexit, because it's not just about supply chain. It's about human resources, labour laws, it's about legal contracts, it's about financial structures, it's about regulatory control. There's a lot of different facets to Brexit, and the Brexit Advisory Team has experts in each of those elements that can come in and help organisations to tackle Brexit, understand Brexit as much as possible. And so I've been working with the Brexit Advisory Team in that element, but also as Wyndham Solutions to go into companies and really on a one-to-one basis say, okay, let's look at Brexit, let's look what that means for your organisation. And it's quite surprising. You go into companies, there's often no one single person identified as the lead for Brexit. So you're trying to find various people that you're dealing with on the various different aspects. And then you're saying, okay, do you understand your own supply chain today? A lot of companies don't know where their raw materials are coming from, or where their suppliers' raw materials are coming from, or where their customers are shipping into, or where they're holding their inventories. What are the service levels that have been agreed? I mean, there's a mountain of things that when you start talking to companies, the first thing I do is I spend a few hours going through a 6-page detail, getting them to understand their own business. And that's for some of them, it's a real education. And I mean, I recently sat with a very large Swedish company, and constantly throughout the day, there was ahas about, we hadn't thought about that aspect. Do we really need to do that? We didn't realise Brexit was going to touch that. And so it's important, I think, for companies to now, even at this late stage, and it is late stage, we've been going 2 years. Companies, I think, many of them have said, this may never happen. Or if it does happen, we'll get a deal that things will carry on as they always have done. And I actually don't think that's true. I think whatever happens, things are going to change. And they need to...
But has it changed over the last 20 years? I mean, the last 40 years. I mean, it's obviously, you were saying at the very beginning, that's where you started. And over those 40 years, has it got more complicated? Has it got easier? I mean, what has happened with the supply chain over those 40 years while we have been in the EU?
I think certainly from an EU perspective, obviously we went into a customs union, free trade, so all of these requirements to do customs clearance at the borders disappeared. So if I was still in that job that I was doing 40 years ago, I would be redundant, because basically you're not doing that anymore, you're just doing that for third country goods. What is interesting, I think, is that customs have also introduced computerization into this whole environment. As I say, I started writing off handwritten documents and taking them across to the customs house. Now it's all computerized and it's done in your office. I actually was, I'm pleased to say, the first person who ever do a computerized customs entry in East Anglia. When they first launched it, I was asked to be the guinea pig, if you like. So I remember coming in at midnight and typing out this computerized entry, and lo and behold, it was popped up, cleared, done. So those things are all developing, and I think those developments are still going on. There's a brand new customs declaration system which has just been introduced, which went live in August, will be fully rolled out for imports by December, and then for exports early next year. And what that's doing is it allows companies to actually control more of the information around customs clearance. It allows people to do these things very often themselves, but it also offers the chance, today when you bring goods through a port, there are so many different agencies that are involved in that process. It's not just customs, there's port health, there's regulatory bodies, there's health and safety checks. There's, I think, 40 different agencies that are involved. What the government have now done is brought that together into one document. So now, I think we have to be very clear. Whatever happens with this, the government does not want to see huge queues at the border. That's never their intention. I think what they're trying to do...
But this is going to work both ways, isn't it? Be huge queues going out and huge queues coming in.
I think it's not in anybody's benefit to have huge queues waiting at the borders. And I think with certainly, even if it goes to no deal and you go to WTO controls, then you've got the element of customs clearance will be computerized. They're already working towards a system whereby you have approved economic operator status, and we'll talk a bit about that later on. That's very important because that's a certification that's agreed in China, in Japan, in the United States, and soon be in Canada, where you have companies that become fast track. Basically, you are checked, you're audited by the government on areas of security, on customs, on business controls. And when you have an AEO certification, it basically offers you fast-track status to a lot of different benefits. The thing they want to tie that with, in the end, is number plate recognition, iris recognition, so that when the goods are rolling off the ferry in Dover, they can see the number plate, they look and say, yeah, that's an approved economic operator company, no need to look at that straight through. And that's ultimately what the government are trying to aim towards, whichever way this goes. And that's why I think it's important for companies to look at AEO. I mean, today, there are far more companies in Germany registered for AEO than there are in the United Kingdom. The UK has been quite slow in embracing this, and I think it's very important for companies to now get hold of that, make sure they're applying for that status. Because again, don't forget, it's not just about EU transactions, it's about transactions with the rest of the world.
We were talking a moment ago about the size of the businesses, and 99.9% of all businesses that are in the UK are one- and two-man band organisations. We're predominantly a service. We're not really a manufacturing country, but we provide services. So it's IP really that we're dealing with on an ongoing basis. Is that why we haven't actually got that involved? Because we're not really a big exporter of actual goods. We're a big exporter of conceptual ideas.
I think it's exporter and importer, first of all, so it applies in both directions. I think, when you look at the value of what's moving through as international trade, the vast majority of international trade is in the hands of a limited number of medium and large companies. These small companies, the one or two people companies, are yes, making movements, but they're actual volumes moving through international port. The things that will cause congestion at the ports are not about the one or two operators, it's about the large and medium-sized operators and their volumes coming through. And if you can get those companies signed up to AEO and get those aware of what the opportunities are, I think that's when you avoid those major queues.
Well, that's going to mitigate, isn't it, to a certain extent, whether it's hard, soft or medium kind
Indeed.
of excess. So we'll listen, more to talk about in just a few moments' time with Paul here on this edition of Business Connections Live. We're talking about your supply chain. Are you an organisation that exports to Europe? Do you import from Europe? And does some of this actually make sense to you as well? Are you sitting there thinking, well, actually, we're going down the route of electronics, we're going down the route of people being able to follow what is taking place just electronically across the internet, across the web, from server to server. Is that the way your business was going anyway? I mean, who knows? Just a very quick question, if you'd answer it very briefly. What is the split then at the moment across the different types of import and export that we have? So with EU, how much do we import from them?
Roughly about 30-40%.
And under World Trade,
about 30-40%. Then you have various other bodies like EFTA and other trade organisations that you have links with. I think the key,
because it does sound, if you're just Joe Public and you're listening to this, it does sound like that we're talking about 90% of all our goods are under EU, and the World Trade bit we just forget about. And the point you made at the very beginning of the programme about the fact that 30% of it is coming under World Trade organisations, and they're the goods that are going to our high street shops.
Correct. Exactly. All these goods coming in from China. We talk about this massive trade imbalance with China, all these major ships arriving with all these containers. It's always the thing before Christmas. You see these programs showing these ships arriving and all these goods coming in. Those are not coming from Europe. They're coming from China, Japan, Far East, and the US, and those all come through today. And those processes are already there.
More from Paul in just a moment in this edition of Business Connections Live. While we're talking about Brexit, there's a surprise. Let's go back to a programme that we put out a little while back, Brexit and the Brexit Advisory Team. You just alluded to them a moment or so ago. Gordon Colquhoun was on the programme. He's the co-founder of the Brexit Advisory Team with a young gentleman called Thomas Lane. They formed the company in 2016. Gordon's business expertise is in research and intelligence and is responsible for the Brexit Intelligence Monitor, which supports the team through analysis and insights into the Brexit process. Now, the programme did go out in April of 2018, earlier on this year. So much has changed, and I think if you're watching this programme at a later date on Catch Up, and you think to yourself, well, that was an interesting conversation, not a thing that they said has actually come to pass. That may well be the case, but it does seem to be a consistent story that is taking place all the time when it comes to Brexit. The one thing for certain is the uncertainty. We can hear a little bit from what Gordon said when he was on the programme. Business Connections Live, 223 to 16th of April 2018, Brexit and the Brexit Advisory Team.
I mean, the United Kingdom is a very powerful force in Europe, regardless of whether we're part of the EU or when we leave the EU, will still be a very, very important partnership. And I think that's what the government's trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve a long, enduring and deep partnership with the EU, and with a special, free trade agreement and a understanding that benefits the both parties. And I'm sure behind the curtains, the EU would probably want to do the same. On the Brexit Advisory Team, my first point would be engage with Brexit. Second point, create a Brexit strategy. And thirdly, if you can't do it yourself, find some external expertise to help you navigate successfully through the Brexit process.
Interesting points that he made. I mean, how much do you think is still relevant to what we're talking about today?
It absolutely is. One of the frustrations I have is we saw some recent statistics that came out that said today 5% of companies in the United Kingdom are fully prepared for Brexit and understand the scenarios, understand what the actions are for each of the possible outcomes. 15% of organisations have done some work but are not really yet to the stage where they can say they've got a plan. 50% of companies have had conversations and 30% of companies have done absolutely nothing. And I think that's frightening. And we're 2 years into this now. I think companies have to be aware, yes, no one knows which way this is going to go. But there are things you could be doing under all of the different scenarios as an organisation to prepare yourself as much as possible for what's coming. And I don't believe many companies have actually gone down that
it's strange, isn't it, what you're saying? Prepare yourself as much as you can for what's coming, but in the same breath, and literally it was the same breath, we don't know what is coming.
Correct, but there are different scenarios. So if it's going to be a no-deal environment with WTO rules, we've already spoken about a number of the things that companies need to be looking at to understand their exposures, understand what their customers are doing, what their suppliers are doing, look at their shipping terms, raft of things they can be looking at to understand that and prepare for it. Likewise, if it's going to be a 2-year transition, after that there's a trade deal. Are you prepared for what's going to come out of that trade deal? We see all the manoeuvrings already starting with Macron this morning on the fisheries. We've seen it with Gibraltar, with Spain. We know all these countries are going to come up with their own particular aspect.
But there are political reasons behind that. Macron, of course, very unpopular in France at the moment because of the unrest that's going on with the diesel increase in taxes there. And of course, Gibraltar is just a thorn in Spain's side, isn't it? And of course, to a certain extent, it takes the eye off the focus on the Catalan issue that they've got as well. So, I mean, a question, I suppose, is, do you see the EU in its present form in 10 years' time? Is it still going to be there?
I think it's going to be tough. I think you can see the problems in Italy. Italy's obviously...
Italy, Greece, all the basket cases around Europe.
Yeah. I think this is the UK leaving. Obviously, Brussels wants to make this as hard as possible, and you can see that happening.
And we are being punished, aren't we?
Well, I think that's inevitable, and they want to make it so difficult for a country to leave that they're going to frighten all the others off.
It is Hotel California, isn't it?
But it is. But again, I come back to the fact that we are where we are. We can't keep on saying, well, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. Let's wait until December. Now let's wait until next year. See what happens in March. I think companies have a real need to start looking at, even at this late stage, what are the things they can be doing with all the different scenarios. Let's talk about how your business is structured, because all businesses are slightly different. Understand what it looks like for their particular organisation, and what are the things that they can be doing now. If it's going to be this way, what can they do? If it's going to be that way, what can they do? To at least have that understanding. And I believe at the moment, a lot of companies are just sitting there with their heads in the sand saying, oh, this either won't happen or it'll be a deal and life won't change. Life is going to change.
But I'm just wondering, is this a bit like the Millennium Bug, which is something completely different, but is it like GDPR being introduced, where there was this big build-up to it, and we talked about GDPR, we all received the emails, please re-sign into my opt-in again, and all of that was taking place. GDPR arrives, and then it just felt like it was a damp squid nearly, nothing really happened. Or at least that's the perception, that nothing really happened. Of course, it's all happening now, and I suppose that's the danger that we've got with this Brexit, hard, soft, or indifferent. Something is going to happen, but it may not be catastrophic on day one. Or do you think it will be catastrophic?
I think we will go through a period of turbulence, because it will be change, and change will always bring turbulence. But I think ultimately, as I said before, I think there's the intelligence in this country. I think there's the business systems. I think it's in everybody's best interest, whichever way this goes, to handle the issues, make sure you're prepared for them, as I've been saying, and then enact that. And yes, we may face a few months of difficulty. All these international supply chains. I was in the automotive supply chain.
Well, I was going to say, that leads on to so automotive, remember that thought, but this is two-way, isn't it? It isn't just a case of us being hit and hurt. It's going to, you look at the German industrial status that is there at the moment. Look at the number of high-quality, high-value items that are, the Mercedes of the world and the Volkswagens of the world, and and all the chain, the Audis and all the rest of it. You've got this huge automotive industry in Germany. If there are tariffs put on their vehicles, they will become instantly the most expensive vehicles on the road. They won't be able to sell them as easily, because the Japanese will be able to come in. The American market will be opened up now. So Ford, it'll be easier for Ford. It'll be easier for Toyota. It'll be easier for them. And now all the German models have got tariffs sitting on them. So this could mean redundancies and closures in Germany. And nobody ever seems to be talking about the impact on the European suppliers to the UK.
I think let's face it, from a manufactured goods perspective, we're net importers. So there's going to be a lot more issues for European manufacturers than there will be for UK manufacturers coming from that particular aspect. I think the duty rate on cars is 10%. So immediately, as soon as if WTO swings in, then cars from Germany, from France, wherever, are all going to attract that duty rate. And that's going to go on top of their existing cost base. And so you could say it's a level playing field then. A level playing field for the automotive manufacturers with the US, with Asia. And I think that's,
This is beginning to sound Trumpish nearly, isn't it?
I think there is this nature of just-in-time supply chains. Over the years, companies have brought down their levels of inventory. They've brought down their level of investment in those particular elements to say, we know this can come through. It's not going to get delayed at the border. Literally, it'll turn up when we need it at the factory. We can do what we need. We can ship it back. And there's many examples of cars actually crossing the border multiple times during their phase of manufacture. And I think, when you look today also at European distribution, I was involved in setting up a Amsterdam distribution centre 20 years ago. And that was in Amsterdam because you could serve the whole of Europe overnight for contact lenses, overnight from Amsterdam. And you didn't have to worry about delays at the border. Now, a lot of those designs are now going to be challenged again if there are these controls that now come in. So will companies still be able to operate those sort of business models? They've certainly got to be re-evaluated, because now some of the costs of the transportation will change. Bringing goods into the UK and the truck moves straight through, optimal cost. If now it's going to get held at the border, if there are delays there, then someone's got to pay for that. Someone's got to pay for that driver to sit there. Someone's got to pay for customs entries. The latest estimation is that we will add 20 million customs entries to the number of customs documents to be done, or customs controls to be done, based upon European imports. they think it'll need about 9,500 extra people to input those things into the system. People who today don't exist and haven't been trained in how to do these things. So there's all different aspects to the supply chain that are going to be affected, whichever way this goes, because even if we come with a tariff-free deal, which is what May is trying to push now as part of the permanent future for trade, but she hasn't talked about customs union. So what sort of customs controls will still be required, even though you have duty-free movement between the countries? In the transition period, everything stays the same. But what happens at the end of the transition period? And I think that's what people's mind will now start to turn to, even if that vote goes through.
So we seem to be talking a lot about the maybes, the perhapses and the what ifs. Is there anything positive that a business owner can be doing today? I mean, okay, they can sit back and they can analyse the potential of what's going on. But if you were going into an organisation saying, right, your supply chain, here are the key things that you can do today that will give you a bit of an edge when it comes further down, regardless of the outcome. Mm-hmm. And it's the linguistics that we use as well, this hard, soft or whatever. Yep. What we're looking at is a form of transition, transition to a number of different kinds of contracts, really, is what we're looking at. Maybe we should stop calling it hard or soft. Maybe we should just talk about a transition deal.
Of course, if it's hard, there will be no transition. I mean, saying end of March next year, we will go to World Trade Organization rules.
Do you think it will?
Well, that's if there is no deal, that's what's now written into law. That's what we've done. We've served Article 50. We've said that's what we're going to do. And ultimately, that's the date we have to leave the European Union. And as you know, as someone in Parliament talked about the other day, that it will need statute to change that. Right? So, you know, we
So
are...
is that what a business owner should be doing today? They should be at least stepping back for a moment and saying, OK, if there is no deal at the end of March, then what we need to have a process, a strategy in place that will cope with that, and then a number of variants to bring it back closer towards, you know, we use the terminology, a softer exit.
I think they look at focus on two main things. First of all, if it's hard Brexit, how is my supply chain designed? Where are my suppliers? Where are my customers? What international movements do I do today? What shipping terms have I got? Am I shipping whereby, take for instance, if you're moving goods from Germany into the United Kingdom, are you shipping them where you're controlling the transportation and all the processes, or is your supplier controlling all that? So shipping terms, if it's leaving Germany, is it ex-works terms? In other words, you're responsible from the time it leaves the plant, or is it delivered terms and you're responsible only when it's arrived with you? That's important because now all these freight costs come into play, and also customs clearance. In the days when I did customs clearance, it charged £20-25 to do a customs clearance. Remember, I just said 20 million possibly extra customs entries. Think of the maths around that. Someone's got to pay for that. So look at your shipping terms, look at your contracts.
But for the automotive industry, the situation that you've got there is, if that is another cost that's on top of the 10% of the increase because of the tariff on the vehicle, all of a sudden, the German motor industry becomes unaffordable.
That's why the automotive industry is so concerned, because they've built themselves on a model now that sees free international movement backwards and forwards, and that's why they've been lobbying so strongly as to making sure that we end up with a deal that allows still free movement.
Hold that thought. More still to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. Paul Mayhew is my guest on the program today. He's the owner of Wyndham Solutions. If you want to find out more about them, you can go to their website. Here it is. And you'll see that they talk about supply chain, Brexit, about who they are. 40 years of supply chain management experience at the highest level. You can find out about the different point of view that they've got, and perhaps maybe how they can help you within your organisation to get you through this entire situation. Brexit and logistics consultancy, that's what they're all about. Paul is the head honcho there, and that's a lovely way of doing it. And he'll come along wearing his hat, smoking a cigarette with a scarf around his neck. But he'll come into your organisation, maybe give you the advice that you need to get you into the position that you need to be. More from Paul in just a few moments' time. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company. We're live here on a Monday. It is a very significant Monday. It's today when, after Theresa May returns, she's got 2 weeks now, having been to the boys and girls in Brussels to thrash out a deal. They've signed a piece of paper. Some would say is it the end of the beginning, or is it really we've just now got as far as the beginning of the beginning? Because it just feels like that now. Are we at the beginning of the beginning? Are we at the beginning of the end? Where are we? And I suppose that is the issues and the problems that we've got. Listen, It's great to have your company as always. More, as I said, from Paul in just a few moments' time. Now, if you're one of the thousands that download the program on a regular basis from iTunes, we'd just like to say thank you very much indeed. Of course, you can watch all the programs if you go to our website at Business Connections Live. But if you want that convenience of being able to take them with you, if you like podcasts, they're on Stitcher, they're on Blueberry, on a whole host of different websites. You can go to our website, of course, businessconnectionslive.com. You'll get all the show notes as well around what we've been talking about. You can watch the program there, and there are just loads of them, so it's a good way of doing it. iTunes, though, is the other way of taking the program with you. If you do download on iTunes, please do leave a review, and it is easy to do that. All you got to do is go to your iTunes account, view the program in iTunes, you see a list of all the programs that we've recorded. And there is also a little tag there that says ratings and reviews. Now, this is important because this helps us spread the good word, the good message about Business Connections Live. Write a review, give it 5 stars, say how great it was and how useful you felt Paul was from the information that he gave us on the program today. And what will happen then, the algorithm that iTunes uses, if somebody is watching an alternative business program, when that business program finishes, then they'll be recommended by iTunes, and that grows the audience, and that's good for you, us, and everybody. So if you can do that, go to iTunes, and please do leave a glowing review about the information that you hear on the program. You're watching Business Connections Live. We're talking about the supply chain today. My guest is Paul Mayhew. He's the owner of Wyndham Solutions. So where do we go to from here? So soft Brexit agree, what should we be working on during the 2-year transition period? We've talked about that. We've talked about the approved economic operator. And the question is, have they applied yet? Is that a difficult thing to do?
No, and so I've passed some information across, which I'd ask you to share after this webcast with your audience. AEO is not difficult to do, but it is really based around your organisation, understanding your organisation from a point of view of security, because it comes in 2 elements. There's the customs element and there's the security element. The security element is built around security of international transport. Are your goods safe from being exposed to terrorism, basically? So are your warehouses secure? Have you got access controls to your buildings? Are you making sure that those routes that you're using have been checked and are safe? That's the security aspect of it. Then you have the customs aspect, and that's really about, are you a good company? Do you do your tax returns on time? Have you been caught evading customs duty at any time? Have you been caught smuggling? And I don't mean dramatically caught smuggling. I mean, has somebody put something in your container a few weeks ago that was done in all innocence, but customs found it, and actually there's now a question mark about whether goods come from that site. We'll have other goods in there, so they're going to double check you. And don't forget, ultimately, customs don't want to check everything that goes through. They haven't got the manpower to do that. So what they're saying is we need to concentrate on the ones that we have a concern about. So let's get off the table the ones that are good guys. And so let's have an audit. Let's look at your tax behaviour. Let's look at your control of documentation and processes. Do you have a process to advise us if there is a problem up front, so that you're being very open and honest with us? And they'll come and do an audit on you, and they'll check. And companies can apply for that. It was taking 6 months for application, and that's why everybody was saying, look, get the application in so that you've got this before, in case it's a hard Brexit, in case it's end of March. So you're now running overtime in terms of getting that in, but get the AEO applications in, because it does give you this fast track status. And as I said before, this isn't just about Europe. This is about importation and shipments with China, with Japan, with the US, and other countries are now looking at this. So you now become a recognised company that are reputable, are structured, are safe to do business with, and customs will see that on the system and say, Company A, they're the good guys. We can just let that go straight through. We don't have to worry. Let's just focus our limited resources on the ones we've got problems or a little bit concerned about. And that's why it's so important.
This ugly monster that is rearing its head at the moment. When we talked about GDPR a couple of months back, one of the problems that you had was if you were collecting data and somebody else was controlling your data or people were supplying you with the data, you had to look after them as well. The people that supplied you or the people you supplied to, they also were part of the criteria that you had to look after.
Yeah.
Surely the same applies here. The people that supply me, I've got to do I have to make certain that they are compliant as well?
That you have a duty to work with your suppliers and customers to promote AEO to them as well. So, because with AEO, it's not just about you, it's about your carrier. I mean, so some of the major global carriers now have AEO. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons they've done that
is it expensive?
No. Not expensive. There are companies out there who will certainly help you through the process.
I'm sure there are.
But not in some, to be honest, the issue there is there are a limited number of experts who can help you do that, and they're inundated. Because, companies are now getting aware that they need to be doing this. They know time's running out. And their issue is a lot of companies don't accurately complete the paperwork to do this because it's a customs document, right? It's a formal approval process with a number of fields to be completed. And if I saw examples recently where somebody used a company name at the top of the page and signed it in a different company name, albeit limited or not limited. As soon as you do that, it's like going through US customs. If you get that document wrong, they'll send you to the back of the queue. Well, that's the same with AEO. You have to be sure, and that's why it's useful to use some of these intermediary companies to say, okay, you'll complete the documents, but we can put that through the process for you and make sure that that goes through smoothly. But I encourage your listeners to think about overall the supply chain. Think about, don't just sit there and wait for this thing to happen and say, oh, it may never happen, or it'll all be all right. There are things that you should have been doing and can still do to start preparing your organization, understand your business, understand your flows, understand what products, talk to your suppliers, talk to your customers about what they're doing, because it's not just about you, you're part of an end-to-end supply chain. Right? Understand that end-to-end supply chain. Talk to your carriers. What are you doing to educate more people to be able to do customs clearances? Because we're going to need people to do that. Have we started hiring people in? The Dutch government have already hired 1,000 extra customs officers because they want this to be smooth. They know that if there are issues on the French border, you'll probably route through Holland instead. They quite would like you to do that. And the Dutch is a logistical centre company. They've always marketed themselves as that. So they're actually out there investing now at government level to be dynamic, to be ready for whatever could happen. And they don't know which way this is going to go. Let's face it, the weekend they voted for the divorce deal and they agreed to the future trade outline that's been done, but they're still a government that invested in a lot of extra customs officers to be ready for whatever happens. And that's what I'm saying companies in the UK should be doing. I'm not saying put thousands of pounds on the table or spend a fortune of money, because I think that's one of the hesitancies here. People say, I don't really want to spend money until I know what I've got to deal with. With this, you're not going to know what you're going to deal with until it's getting too late. And so it's understanding what those alternatives are and modelling those alternatives. And that's what companies like Wyndham Solutions, my organisation, the Brexit advisory team, are out there to do.
If you were to look forward, we're nearly at the end of the programme, but if you were to look forward in 5 years' time, where do you think we'll be as a trading nation?
I think the UK ultimately will be stronger. I think we will be able to strike other trade deals with the rest of the world. And I think we will still be, we're the 5th largest economy in the world. We're going to still be a major customer of the European Union countries. So are they going to turn around and say we don't want anything to do with you, or you left, we're not going to play? No, of course not. Major customer, right on their doorstep. And I think the UK has an opportunity here to really create a new business model for itself and really be a dynamic centre for global business.
Wow, well, that's a positive ending to a programme that's a bit of a worry, actually. Listen, I hope you've enjoyed today's programme. We always invite our guests to give us the key takeaways from the programme. That's straight down this camera over here, camera number 4. Just say who you are and where you're from, and the airways, as long as you want, as long as you need, are all yours. Straight down camera number 4, say who you are and where you're from.
So I'm Paul Mayhew. I run Wyndham Solutions, and it's all about Brexit supply chain. I think the critical thing and the message I've been trying to get over today is try and be as prepared as you can for all the various scenarios that are coming towards you. We don't yet know if it's going to be a no deal, if it's going to be hard, soft, whatever it may turn out to be. There are things your organisation should and could be doing to prepare yourselves, understand your own company's position, what your exposures are and what your opportunities are. Don't forget, Brexit is also an opportunity. It's not all about bad news. It's about how you move ahead of the competition. And I greatly believe if you do some of the things that I'm talking about, you can actually be more advanced than your competitor, win business out of this, and open up new horizons for your organisation. So please reach out, talk about Brexit, and let's work together to move you forward.
And don't forget, if you want to go to Paul's website, it is here, Wyndham Solutions Limited, talking about supply chain, Brexit, about who they are and how they can help your organisation and your business get through Brexit over the coming months. It's going to be a difficult time. I think there's going to be a lot of press, there's going to be a lot of information that we're all going to see, and I think there's going to be a lot of conflicting information, and it's going to be, at times, somewhat confusing as well. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the program today, and I shouldn't really ask, but if you had it to do again, were you an inner or an outer?
I was an outer.
You were an outer. If you had it to do again and there was a referendum tomorrow,
Exactly.
which it may well be, Gordon's just whispered in my ear, and the day after until they get the answer they're looking for, what would you do? Would you still vote the same?
Yes, I would. I've never hidden the fact that I voted to leave, I think it offers a lot of opportunities for the country, and I actually believe that if there was another vote coming, I think the people who voted leave before would be so angry that they were asked to vote again that there would be an even greater majority to leave. That's personal opinion.
Which is interesting because some of the press, some of the media, of course, are saying that people are so sick and tired of it now they'd vote to remain. So they don't know. Nobody knows, do they?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
But again, don't forget the media said before the referendum that it was going to be a Remain outcome.
Yeah, what do the media know about anything? They know nothing. We know nothing. We're surmising. All of us are surmising. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the program today. I have really, really enjoyed it. It's the right day, the right time, the right place to be talking about what we're going to be doing with Brexit. Hope you found it interesting. You may well disagree with everything that's been said, but the advice that Paul has given when it comes to what you should be doing with your supply chain at the moment, at least be doing something. The danger is that all of us who have a supply chain that we depend on for our business to succeed, we may be just sitting back and waiting to see what's going to happen. In this particular instance, you cannot afford to allow that to be actually happening. So, get your supply chain in place, get your supply chain sorted out, and who knows, maybe Brexit will be a success for the country. It's beginning to sound that perhaps, potentially, possibly, it could be, but we've still got to get it right. Paul, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
This has been an absolute cracking program today. Hope you've enjoyed the show. We're going to do it all again next Monday. Again, we're just gluttons for punishment. It won't be about Brexit, though. Great show lined up for you next week. Please do join us at midday. Coming up in future programmes, we've got Sarah Alexander of Coaching Magnificent. She's going to be joining me on the programme. Deborah Hume from Minerva Engagement. She's a neuroscientist, Louise Punter, the CEO of Surrey Chamber of Commerce. Be interesting to get their take on it at the moment. Be nice to get somebody back from the CBI on the program, or the IOD. We'll have to have a go at doing that, I think, in the near future. We've got some cracking shows lined up before Christmas, some cracking shows lined up after Christmas as well. But until we do it all again, thank you very much indeed for watching the programme today. So, it's a date in your diary. Next Monday at midday. We'll see you then. From Paul and myself, have a great week. Till then, bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.